12 60s horror movies. The 60s have been a crucial decade for the horror film genre, as there was a drastic change in its entire production and perception. Legendary directors like Hitchcock and Mario Bava have been great contributors to the genre during this decade, with back-to-back cinematic masterpieces. Audiences were left flabbergasted at the new possibilities of content in cinema. Some films became trendsetters, while some served as the building blocks of modern-day horror films. The decade marked a new level of acceptance for violence and sexuality. You might feel bored at first, as we all have been exposed to a very advanced level of visual effects and concepts. However, if you wish to watch them, considering the lack of facilities and opportunities during their time, this video is your perfect watcher's guide. So keep the lights turned on, as today we dig deep into our top 12 horror movies from the 60s. Before we go into our explanation, we have a very small request. If you like our content, please support us by subscribing to our channel. This is a small click for you, but for us, it means a lot. Thank you. Let's begin. Number 1. Rosemaryís Baby, 1968. The movie revolves around Rosemary and her husband Guy. Guy and Rosemary Woodhouse relocate to New York City's Bramford, big Renaissance revival apartment complex. They reject Hutch's warning about Bramford's terrible history of witchcraft and murder. Rosemary encounters Terry Giannoffrio, a young, recuperating heroin addict who has been taken in by Minnie and Roman Castevet, the Woodhouse's elderly neighbors. Terry seems to leap to her death from the Castevets' 7th floor flat one night, disturbing the Castevets. Guy becomes fond of them, but Rosemary finds them bothersome and intrusive. Rosemary receives Terry's jewelry as a good luck charm from Minnie, who claims it contains tannis root. Guy gets cast in a renowned play when the lead actor falls blind for no apparent reason. Guy wants to have a child with Rosemary now that his acting career is prospering. Minnie sends over individual cups of chocolate mousse for their dinner on the night they hope to conceive, consuming which Rosemary becomes disoriented and passes out. In a hallucinatory state, she sees herself being raped by Satan, a demonic entity, as Guy, the Castevets, and other Bramford residents stare on. Rosemary gets pregnant with a baby due in the last week of June. Strange things start to happen soon after. Guy becomes detached and distant as Rosemary has bizarre nightmares and hears unusual noises. Rosemary then becomes pregnant and suspects that her neighbors have special intentions for her kid. Rosemary gets further secluded as she becomes pregnant, and the wicked reality is exposed only after Rosemary gives birth. Rosemary is not feeling well thanks to a kind Minnie who continues giving her strange potions for the pregnancy. The only option is to pray for Rosemaryís Baby. Based on Ira Levin's 1967 novel of the same name, Rosemaryís Baby is an American psychological horror film released in 1968. However, with Roman Polanski's brilliant direction and a series of genuinely good performances by the cast, the film is superior and far more convincing than the novel. The film had a set milestone in the modern horror genre with its realistic take on a plot that ultimately is supernatural. Polanski prefers giving plenty of information to his audience early in the movie, for which the thrill and suspense of the plot are solely based on its characters in the story. Mia Farrow as Rosemary and Ruth Gordon as Mrs. Castevet have delivered their finest performances. Surprisingly, both resented Polanski's structured algorithm of shooting and improvised in many scenes, which made it to the financial cut as it came out brilliantly. Number 2. Peeping Tom, 1960. The movie starts with Mark Lewis, who encounters Dora, a prostitute in London, and secretly films her with a camera hidden beneath his coat. He pursues the woman inside her flat, murders her, and afterwards views the tape in his den. The next morning, masquerading as a reporter, Lewis records the police removing Dora's body from her house. Lewis is a film crew worker who hopes to be a director himself. He also works part-time as a photographer, selling soft porn pin-up photographs of ladies. He is a quiet, introverted young guy who seldom interacts with others outside of his colleagues. He lives in his late father's house, renting most of it through an agency while appearing as a renter himself. Helen Stevens, a charming young woman who lives in the apartment below Mark's with her blind mother, befriends him out of curiosity when he gets caught snooping at her 21st birthday party. Through home movies recorded by his father, Mark discloses to Helen that as a youngster, he was used as a lab rat for his father's psychological tests on fear in the nervous system. Mark's father, a well-known psychologist, would investigate his son's reactions to different stimuli, such as lizards he placed on his bed, and would video the youngster in a variety of scenarios, even going so far as to capture his son's emotions while he sat on his mother's deathbed. He kept a close eye on his son and even wired all of the rooms so he could spy on him. Directed by Michael Powell, Peeping Tom is a British psychological horror thriller film of 1960 which was considered among the pioneers of contemporary slasher films. Despite harsh receptions from critics over the controversies revolving around the director, the film is considered to be a masterpiece. Powell and his son Columba Powell had played the roles of young Mark Lewis and his abusive father, which was not taken well by critics, and they accused Michael of abusing his son. The film was, however, ranked the 78th greatest British film of all time by the British Film Institute and created a storm at its release. However, it was taken down for 5 years for its questionable storyline. The movie has been gutsy at showcasing the killer's perspective, and some scenes might be hard to watch for the weak-hearted. The movie nearly destroyed Powell's career, but is considered to be one of the finest, daring, and memorable psycho horror movies of all time.
Mitch?
Number 3. The Birds, 1963. The movie starts in the early 1960s at a pet store in San Francisco. Melanie Daniels, the modern-day affluent socialite, meets lawyer Mitch Brenner, who is hunting for lovebirds for his sister Kathy's 11th birthday. Mitch recognizes Melanie from her court appearance for a practical prank gone wrong and pretends to be mistaking her for the store employee. Mitch quizzes Melanie's bird knowledge, which she fails. He admits to knowing her and that his pretense was designed to help her appreciate being on the receiving end of a joke. Mitch exits the store without purchasing anything. Finding him attractive, Melanie buys the lovebirds and goes to Bodega Bay to make peace with Mitch, who had gone there for the weekend to his family's property. Melanie takes a boat in town and crosses the bay to leave the lovebirds at the Brenner property. Mitch notices Melanie when she is on retreat and drives into town to meet her at the pier. A gull attacks Melanie as she reaches the dock. The birds in the neighborhood start behaving abnormally. Hundreds and thousands of birds soon attack everyone outside, making survival difficult. Mitch observes that the attacks come in waves and often follow the same pattern of the birds massing silently, suddenly attacking and then departing quietly. There is no justification for such an occurrence. As the movie progresses, we see the two fight for their survival at Bodega Bay. Based on Daphne du Maurier's story from 1952 of the same name, The Birds, directed and produced by Alfred Hitchcock, is an American natural horror thriller film. Although the film had controversies regarding Tippi Hedren's lead performance, it is considered to be Hitchcock's best and very complex work. Unlike other horror films, this one does not explain the mystery of horror, which is even more terrifying. The movie's subtle take on background score making bird flapping sounds dominant is sheer brilliance. The making of the film has been tedious, as Hitchcock revealed at The Dick Cavett Show in 1968 that there were 3,200 birds that were trained for their part in the film. In 2016, the film was regarded as culturally, historically, or aesthetically significant by the United States Library of Congress and preserved in their National Film Registry. It's indeed a true genius of a film and a must-watch for horror movie lovers. Number 4. Quatermass in the Pitt, 1967. The movie takes place in London, where workers dig up to discover an unusual skull while constructing an expansion to the London Underground at Hobbs End. Dr. Matthew Roney, a paleontologist, diagnoses the skull to be of a 5-million-year-old ape-man, which is older than any previous discovery. One of Roney's helpers discovers a piece of a metallic item nearby. They summon an army bomb disposal squad, believing it to be an unexploded explosive. Professor Bernard Quatermass joins Breen after the bomb disposal squad requests his aid. Quatermass disagrees with Breen's conclusion that the buried item is a V-weapon. When another skull is discovered within one of the bomb's chambers, Quatermass and Roney realize that the thing itself must be 5 million years old. Quatermass feels the device is of extraterrestrial origin due to its heat resistance, while Roni is positive the 8 men are terrestrial. Barbara Jude, Roni's assistant, travels to the site with Quatermass. She is interested in the area's name, remembering that Hob is an old term for the devil. Quatermass and Barbara discover historical stories of hauntings and other ghostly sightings dating back many centuries, which coincide with land disturbances near Hob's End. Quatermass finds that many of the homes in the area were abandoned by their residents 40 years ago due to weird noises that were thought to be ghosts. When Quatermass's hypothesis that the rocket can awaken dormant evil in humans is proven, all hell breaks free. They have reawakened a long dormant evil that now threatens humanity. Based on a BBC television series of the same name, Quatermass and the Pit, which is a sequel to the films, The Quatermass Experiment and Quatermass 2 is a 1967 British sci-fi horror movie. Written by Nigel Neal and directed by Roy Ward Baker, the film is pretty straightforward, following the original television series faithfully, and was considered the best among the Quatermass movies. Nigel waited more than 6 years after writing the first screenplay in 1961 in search of funds, as American co-financiers didn't show much interest in its making. The film has an undeniable elemental power to it, and the sense of eeriness and suspense builds up brilliantly to a chaotic and thrilling ending. Andrew Kerr, playing the role of Professor Bernard Quatermass, has done a great job with a memorable performance. He has been the anchor for the Quatermass movies, making Professor Bernard Quatermass the first icon of British television in the 50s. Number 5. Black Sabbath, 1963. The film comprises an anthology of 3 horror stories. The first story, called The Telephone, is about Rosie, a French call girl who returns home at night to her apartment in the basement and starts getting odd phone calls from Frank, her former pimp who escaped from jail. Rosie is afraid as her testimony landed Frank in prison. Rosie calls Mary for comfort. The ladies are estranged, but Rosie believes that only Mary can assist her. Frank phones again seconds later, pledging that no matter what Rosie does, he would have his revenge. The next story, called The Verdalak, is set in 19th century Russia, where Vladimir Dufay, a young aristocrat, discovers a decapitated body with a knife sunk into its heart, which he takes. He is contacted by Giorgio, who informs him that the knife belongs to his missing father. Dufay accepts Giorgio's offer and meets the rest of the family, including his wife, their little son Ivan, Giorgio's younger brother Pietro, and sister Zdenka. They are all waiting for the return of the father Gorka, who has gone in search of a Turkish brigand who is actually a Wurdalak, a living cadaver that feeds on human blood, particularly that of loved ones. And the third and the last story, called The Drop of Water, is about Nurse Helen Chester, who is summoned by the maid of an old psychic to dress the corpse for burial. She observes a sapphire ring on the body's finger while dressing it. Chester snatches it after accidentally knocking over a glass of water, causing it to drop on the floor. She is then stung by a fly. Chester returns to her flat and experiences odd occurrences. The fly returns to bother her, and the lights in her apartment go out, while the sound of pouring water can be heard from numerous spots. Chester discovers the woman's body in her bed. Directed by Mario Bava, Black Sabbath is a 1963 horror anthology consisting of 3 separate stories introduced by everyone's favorite Boris Karloff. Despite being a low-budget film, Black Sabbath is an outstanding production. Bava's direction has been impeccable, probably a demonstration of his abilities in the realm of horror, giving consistent thrills with the 3 stories. Ubaldo Terzano and Bava himself did a commendable job in the film's cinematography, with gorgeous and elegant visuals. In all 3 short stories, there has been a physical object of fear, like for example, the red telephone or the ring, and thematic audio effects adding up to the eeriness of the scenes. Boris Karloff and Zdenka's father Gorka from the story The Wurdalak was brilliant and horrifying, and so was the stunning Susie Anderson with her breathtaking performance as Zdenka. In 1968, English rock band and pioneers of heavy metal music Black Sabbath got their name changed from Earth to that of the movie after losing their audience at a small club in Birmingham to a movie theater showing Black Sabbath. With all its massive elements, Black Sabbath secured its place at 73 in the poll for all-time best horror films by Time Out. This masterpiece by Mario Bava is a must-watch for everyone. Number 6. Psycho, 1960. The movie opens at a Friday afternoon date at Phoenix Hotel, where Marion Crane and her lover Sam Loomis discuss their incapacity to marry due to Sam's debts. Marion returns to work intending to steal a $40,000 lump sum payment left with her for a bank deposit and travel to Sam's home in Fairville, California. Marion rushes to exchange her automobile on the way, prompting suspicion from both the car dealer and a California Highway Patrol officer. Marion spends the night at the Bates Motel, which is located off the main route, and conceals the stolen money in a newspaper. Norman Bates, the hotel's proprietor, descends from a big mansion atop a hill overlooking the motel, registers Marion under an assumed name she employs, and asks her to dinner. When Norman returns home, he has a dispute with his mother regarding Marion's presence, which Marion overhears. Norman returns with a small supper and expresses regret for his mother's tantrums. Marion resolves to travel to Phoenix the next morning to repay the stolen money. Marion is in the shower when a mysterious figure approaches and stabs her to death. Psycho, released in 1960, is an American psychological horror film based on the 1959 novel by Robert Bloch of the same name. With Janet Leigh being nominated for Best Supporting Actress and Hitchcock for Best Director, the movie was nominated for 4 Academy Awards. Psycho is a timeless classic and definitely one of Hitchcock's best films. Being one of the earliest examples of slasher films, the movie had set a milestone in the horror genre, changing the level of acceptance for sexuality and violence in American films. The reason why the movie is remarkable is that it connects to our fears, which are very real and existing. The background score, written by Bernard Herrmann, is phenomenal, which made the scenes create an unbearable pitch of excitement. During the production of the film, Hitchcock was so pleased with Herrmann that he doubled his salary. The movie is an exemplary excursion of horror and suspense and is definitely a visual delight.
And my pretty hand, soon I will be sleeping.
Number 7. The Fearless Vampire Killers, 1967. The narrative purports to take place deep in the heart of Transylvania in the mid-19th century, where an elderly researcher and former professor of Königsberg University, Abronsius, and his assistant Alfred are on the lookout for vampires. Alfred is fumbling and reclusive, while Abronsius is elderly and withering, barely surviving the ruthlessly frigid trip through the icy woodlands. The two hunters appear to be on a long quest for traces of vampires as they arrive in a little town. The two stay at a nearby inn teeming with angst-ridden residents doing bizarre rites to stave off an invisible evil. While staying at the inn, Alfred develops feelings for Sarah, the overprotected daughter of tavern manager Johann Chagall. Alfred observes Sarah being taken by Count von Kralach, the local vampire king. Chagall, crazed with sorrow and armed only with a bundle of garlic, rushes to rescue her but is apprehended, drained of his blood, and vampirized. Abronsius and Alfred pursue Chagall's route in the snow to Kralach's frightening castle in the neighboring snow-blanketed hills when Chagall awakens and assaults Magda, the tavern's attractive maidservant and the object of his passion while he was still human. They break into the castle but are caught by Kukol, the Count's hunchbacked valet. They are led to meet the Count, who questions Abronsius with an air of aristocratic majesty about why he has come to the castle. They devise a plan to save Sarah and eliminate their evil host. Originally released in the United Kingdom as Dance of the Vampires, The Fearless Vampire Killers is a 1967 horror comedy film. Roman Polanski, the director and co-writer with Gerard Brock, also starred in the film as Alfred along with his to-be wife Sharon Tate, who played the role of Sarah Chagall. The film is shot in the Alps with a brilliant work of lens from the multiple BAFTA Awards winning cinematographer Douglas Slocum. The film maintains the basic vibe of vampire movies but adds a comic touch to it. Sharon Tate was ravishing in the movie and is said to have gone through a very unusual form of auditioning. She met Polanski twice for dinner with almost no conversation, after which she was invited to Polanski's apartment. Leaving her alone, Polanski vanished and reappeared wearing a scary mask, to which Sharon started screaming in terror. Noting her reactions, Polanski selected her for the role. So if you are looking for some horror comedy during the 60s, then this one will certainly not let you down. Number 8. Blood and Black Lace, 1964. As the movie starts, we see Isabella, one of several gorgeous models employed by Christian Haute Couture, a Roman fashion firm, is going around the grounds at night when she is viciously murdered by an attacker wearing a white, featureless mask, a black hat, and a trench coat. Massimo Morlacci, who co-manages the salon with newly widowed Countess Cristiana Cuomo, is investigated and interviewed by police investigator Silvestri. He also investigates Isabella's ex-boyfriend, antique dealer Franco Scalo. Silvestri discovers that he is a cocaine user and that Isabella sought to help him overcome his addiction. Isabella is discovered to have kept a journal chronicling the personal lives and possibly the dark secrets of the workers. Nicole, one of the models and Scalo's present girlfriend, discovered the journal and pledges to turn it over to the cops, but her colleague Peggy snatches it during the fashion show. Late at night, she takes her friend Peggy Payton's car and drives to her lover Scalo's store to see him. Nevertheless, the masked assassin pursues Nicole and murders her in the hopes of finding the notebook. But Peggy had taken the journal to remove portions that were damaging to her, and she was also slain by the perpetrator. To retrieve the journal, the masked assassin begins killing all of the models in and around the home. Directed by Mario Bava, the movie is considered to be among the first giallo films. Released in 1964, it is one of Bava's best films and is marked as an evolution in the thriller genre. One might find the killings gruesome and disturbing, but with the film's build-up and suspense, it is impossible for anyone to discount their attention. One of the most striking talents of the legendary director is his visuals and concert of colors for the film. The film then was a trendsetter and paved for the path for many more directors for making slasher films. Cameron Mitchell and Ava Bartok, playing the characters Massimo Morlacci and Contessa Cristiana Cuomo, respectively, were brilliant. Due to the low budget of the film, shots were taken using a child's wagon. The film was commercially unsuccessful, but had a major influence on the style of making giallo films. Mario Bava's films have a very distinguishable and unique model of progression and are a visual treat and a must-watch for to-be directors, cinematographers, and also the mainstream audience. Number 9. The Devil Rides Out, 1968. The movie is set in 1929 in London and the south of England. The narrative begins with Nicholas, Duc de Richelieu, examining the peculiar behavior of a friend's son, Simon Aaron, who lives in a house adorned with bizarre marks and a pentagram. He instantly realizes that Simon is engaged in the occult. They find out that the great leader Mokata is intending to baptize Simon and his buddy Tanith Carlyle to serve the devil. De Richelieu and Rex Van Ryn are successful in rescuing Simon and another young neophyte Tanith from the devil-worshipping cult, but during the rescuing, they disturb a ceremony on Salisbury Plain that makes Mokata summon the devil, the goat of Mendes. As the movie makes progress, we see Mokata, who is adamant about having his new acolytes by his side, and unleashes the power of hell to reclaim them, and how both Richelieu and Rex get engaged in the fight with evil. Based on Dennis Wheatley's 1934 novel of the same name, the movie The Devil Ride Out, also known as The Devil's Bride, is considered to be one of the best works of director Terence Fisher. The film's format gets right into storytelling without much peripheral explanation or descriptions, which helped in maintaining the thrill throughout its run. Evil exists, and there is no dispute in the movie regarding its presence. The entire cast of the film did a fine job with the script, especially Charles Gray as the evil priest, Mokata, with his desperation to get Simon and Tanith to join his satanic clique. However, Christopher Lee in the role of Nicholas Duc de Richelieu surpassed all levels of appreciation with his brilliant acting. Patrick Moore, who played the role of Simon, was actually a replacement for Roddy McDowall, as he had to quit the last minute to care for his friend Louise Brooks, who was suffering from emphysema and arthritis in New York. This film can be considered as Fisher's tour de force and is highly recommendable to watch. Number 10. Night of the Living Dead, 1968. Barbara and Johnny, siblings, travel to a cemetery in rural Pennsylvania to pay their father's grave a visit. Due to technical issues, their vehicle radio goes off the air. As they are about to leave, a bizarre ashen-faced figure in a ragged suit murders Johnny and assaults Barbara. She escapes and seeks refuge in a farmhouse, only to discover the lady who lived there deceased and half-eaten. She notices a swarm of odd ghouls approaching the home, commanded by the guy from the graveyard. A man called Ben comes, secures the farmhouse as he boards up the windows and doors, and chases the ghouls out with a lever-action rifle he discovered in the closet and fire, which the ghouls dread. They're surrounded by the wandering dead. Ben works hard to keep the doors and windows shut. The news reports, on the other hand, are bleak, with creatures springing back to life all over the place. Barbara and Ben are taken aback when they discover 5 individuals, Harry, Helen, and Karen Cooper, as well as a young couple, Tom and Judy, hiding out in the basement. Their only option is to obtain some gasoline from a nearby pump into a vehicle that is running on empty, but this necessitates battling the hordes of voracious walking corpses outside. Disagreements arise immediately, with Harry Cooper demanding to be in control. Their odds of surviving the night dwindle minute by minute as their condition worsens. Directed, photographed, and edited by George A. Romero, the movie Night of the Living Dead is one of the most successful independent films ever made. This 1968 American horror film earned a profit of approximately $30 million, which was equivalent to 263 times its budget. Despite having a cult following and acclaim among critics, the film attracted controversy and negative reviews during its initial days of release for its violence and bloodshed. However, later outlets such as the New York Times, Total Film, and Empire had the movie in their lists of the greatest films ever made. The film's brainchild was Richard Matheson's 1954 Hallmark sci-fi novel I Am Legend, where flesh-eating vampires dominate Earth after a disaster. Scenes with ghouls tearing and eating the flesh of what was once a human stirred the audiences in 1968, as such a form of terror was unknown back then. Despite being a commercial success, Romero saw very little profit as the distributors outsmarted him, taking most of it. Back then, the movie was a sensation and is definitely a good watch. Number 11. Satan's Sadists, 1969. The movie is about the story of brutal motorcyclists going on a murdering rampage in the desert, prompting potential victims to seek heinous retaliation. The narrative revolves around the Satans, an illegal motorcycle gang that roams the American Southwest deserts. Anchor is the gang's boss, and the other members include Firewater, Acid, Muscle, Willie, Romeo, and Gina. The group stumbles upon 2 lovers and strikes them, beating up the man and raping the female. Following the attacks, they kill both of them and drive their car over a cliff with them inside. The group travels to a cafe in the middle of nowhere in the California desert and starts terrorizing Lowe, his customers, and his waitress Tracy. The Satans drag Lowe, Chuck, and Nora away from the cafe. Anchor explains why they despise cops after Nora is raped. Anchor murders the 3 of them. After a brief slaying, one of the patrons, Johnny and Tracy, try to flee into the desert from the motorcyclists. They must reach a town before the Satans track them down and murder them. Satan's Sadists is one of the few of Al Adamson's bests. The 1969 American outlaw biker film is filled with violence with a mix of the biker and horror genre. Along with various elements of horror, the film also portrays the hippie culture. The crimes associated with the treacherous bike gang, the Satans, are shown boldly with a lot of gore, making sure that the audience does not leave the theaters without getting scared. With American legendary actor Russ Tambin making his role look real, the film seemed to have exploited the case of the Manson murders in California, which had taken place in the same year. With good camera work by cinematographer Gary Grave, the film also features a memorable soundtrack by Harley Hatcher that beautifully adds up to the vibe of the movie. Al Adamson shot the film in just 8 days and anchored independent international pictures on the map. Despite being a low-budget film, the movie received a noticeable amount of appreciation. Number 12. Kill Baby Kill, 1966. In 1907, Dr. Paul S.Y. is sent to the Carpathian hamlet of Carmingham to do a post-mortem on Irina Hollander, a woman who died in an isolated chapel under dubious circumstances. Monica Shuftan, a medical student who has just returned from visiting her parents' graves, is appointed as his witness. They discover a silver coin embedded in Hollander's heart during the examination. The inhabitants are used to medicinal methods and beliefs that SY deems ridiculous, and they say that Carmingham is haunted by the spirit of a young girl, Melissa, who curses everyone she visits. Ruth, the town witch, performs a ceremony to cure the curse after the girl visits Nadian, the daughter of local innkeepers. That evening, SY travels to the estate of Baroness Grapes to meet with a colleague, Inspector Kruger. When he reaches the big, dilapidated home, the Baroness assures him that no such Kruger exists.
I was to join a colleague here, Inspector Kruger.
There's no inspector here.
That's why he runs into the ethereal young girl on his way out. Directed by Mario Bava, the movie is a 1966 Italian Gothic horror film starring Giacomo Rossi and Eric Blank. The plot inclining to mystery fiction and thriller, the film is also considered to be Bava's second giallo film. The film's budget was low compared to other Bava films, but did manage to be more than commercially successful. Garnering positive feedback from Variety and Monthly Film Bulletin, the film was ranked 56 in the list of best horror films on a Time Out poll. With Bava's unique visual ideas and Antonio Rinaldi's cinematography, the film manages to portray the sinister vibe of the plot. Mario Bava and his team were said to be so dedicated to the making of the film that they agreed to work without pay when the producers ran out of money in 2 weeks. The film is a textbook for learning how to hold suspense and the art of revealing. This is what Bava is best at, building a slow momentum, making the audience feel confused early in the plot, and then delivering a high-pitched excitement with the climax. Bava's tendencies to induce fear with objects is also seen with the bouncing ball, which along with the background music give goosebumps. Performances from the cast were decent, but were overshadowed by the thrill and suspense of the plot. Even if you are not a Bava fan, this movie is a must-watch for all. And if you liked our content, don't forget to leave a like and subscribe to us if you haven't already. Have a good one and be safe. Thanks everyone.